Imagine this. You're working at a decent company, a respectable corporation. You work hard every day, keeping your head down, hoping to climb the ladder based on merit. Then one day, out of the blue, corporate drops a new CEO on you. This guy's resume is pure gold. But there's something about his eyes that gives you the creeps. It's how do you put it? A cold, emotionless, almost reptilian stare. And sure enough, his first week on the job, he does something that makes the entire company's jaw hit the floor. He personally shuts down several innovative R&D projects, the very projects led by the most respected veterans in the company, the ones everyone agreed were the future of the business. In the conference room, those gray-haired old-timers try to argue, to reason with him, but he just listens, stone-faced, and says, "This decision is not up for discussion." Then, before anyone can even process what just happened, he promotes a handful of notorious company sycophants to vice president. You know the type, the ones who can't do much besides create a slick PowerPoint and enthusiastically praise everything the boss says. And here's the kicker. He uses a massive chunk of the company's cash that was earmarked for that R&D to give these new VPs an obscene, eye-watering bonus and stock package. The atmosphere in the office instantly drops to freezing. You're sitting in your cubicle, listening to the hushed whispers and quiet sighs of your colleagues, and a million alarm bells are going off in your head. You're thinking, what is this guy's deal? Is he a complete idiot? He's going to drive this company straight into the ground. Was the board of directors blind? How could they hire such a moron? But what if I told you that everything he just did wasn't foolish at all? That it was, in fact, a calculated, ruthlessly efficient, and perhaps the only correct choice he could make? What if I told you he did it all for one reason, to keep his job as CEO, and that behind his actions lies a cold, hard algorithm of power that's been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years? Music shifts, the beat drops, and the main video begins. Hey friends, and welcome to the channel. Today, we're going to talk about a book that will send a chill down your spine, but at the same time, make you feel like your IQ has just jumped 50 points. A book that's like a grimoire for power players, a dark guide to the Game of Thrones, the Dictator's Handbook. And I've got to be honest with you all, the afternoon I first finished this book, you know that feeling? It was like being Neo in the Matrix after he finally takes the red pill. You suddenly realize that everything you thought you believed in, all those nice stories about fairness, justice, acting for the good of the company, for the good of the country, it all just dissolves, like lines of code falling away. And you finally see the world for what it is, a cold, underlying operating system, driven by the raw, naked pursuit of power and self-interest. After reading it, when I watched the news, when I saw the moves these world leaders were making, you know what it felt like? It was like I had been given a pair of X-ray glasses. I could look right through their eloquent speeches and see the raw, dark desires and fears in their hearts. But here's what really gave me goosebumps. As I was reading the rules in the book, like keep your inner circle as small as possible and make sure you control the treasury, my mind was struck by lightning ding, and I was instantly connected to two other ancient texts I'd read before. One was from 500 years ago, from that bastard of an Italian thinker from the Renaissance, Machiavelli. In his infamous book, The Prince, he openly wrote, and I quote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved." Sound familiar? The vibe is exactly the same. The other book is even more insane. It dates back over 2,000 years to the legalist school in China that helped Emperor Qin Shi Huang unify the country. A ruthless guy named Shang Yang wrote the Book of Lord Shang, and the stuff in there about weakening the people and tiring the people to keep them too busy to cause trouble, about designing a system of rewards and punishments to make everyone function like a cog in the ruler's machine. My first thought was, man, if you could get those three guys, Machiavelli, Shang Yang, and the authors of this book, together for a poker game, That would be the most terrifying table in history. And it just blew my mind. For over 2 millennia, whether in the castles of Europe or the palaces of Asia, the people at the very top of the pyramid have all been secretly passing around the same playbook, sharing the same dirty little secret. It's like a secret handshake for rulers, spanning space and time. Now, if this kind of dark wisdom fascinates you, if you get a kick out of hearing me dissect these ancient forbidden texts, let me know in the comments, or just smash that like button. If this video does well, I'll make it a point to do a couple of deep dives on Machiavelli and Shang Yang, these grandmasters of the dark arts of power. I guarantee that after you hear them, you'll see the world in a whole new, colder light. Okay, so what kind of world does this secret handbook reveal? Before we get into the deep psychology, let's take a few minutes to lay out the game board so everyone can see the rules clearly. The genius of this book is that it strips away all the fancy ideological costumes. It tells us that a ruler, no matter how flowery his speeches are, is basically just playing a survival game of distributing the loot. To understand it, you just have to remember that in his world, everyone is divided into 3 circles. Animation of 3 concentric circles appears on screen. Let's use an analogy everyone can get. A pirate ship. Imagine you are the captain of this pirate ship. You have a crew of 100 pirates. These 100 pirates are the outermost circle, the nominal selectorate. In theory, they all have a say in who gets to be captain. But in reality, most of them are busy swabbing the decks, rowing the oars, and doing the grunt work. They never get near the captain's quarters. Their opinions are about as important as the sea breeze. So whose opinion matters? Well, there are maybe a dozen or so senior, influential pirates on the ship. They might be the leaders of small cliques or have some essential skills. This group forms the middle circle, the real selectorate. They have the right to stand up and shout during a vote for a new captain, to sway the crowd. But who really decides your fate? Who determines whether you'll still be sleeping in the captain's cabin tonight? It's the 4 or 5 people closest to you. Your first mate, your master gunner, your boatswain, and that fat cook who controls the rum and the food. These 4 or 5 people are the innermost, smallest, and most critical circle, the winning coalition. Whether your captaincy is secure has nothing to do with whether all 100 pirates are getting rich. It depends on one thing and one thing only. When you bring back a chest of gold, are those 4 or 5 guys happy with their share? As long as you give the biggest gold coins and the shiniest jewels to these key lieutenants, as long as you make them feel that sticking with you is more profitable than joining someone else, or even becoming captain themselves, then you're golden. Even if the other 90-something pirates are so hungry they're chewing on the deck boards, they can't start a mutiny. Because the people who control the violence and the resources are all on your side. This logic doesn't just apply to pirates and kings. Put it in a more modern, relatable setting, like an American high school in a teen movie. The most popular girl in school, the head cheerleader, Regina George. She's the dictator. Does she need to please everyone in the school, the nominal selectorate? No. She only needs to keep her 2 or 3 closest friends, her inner circle, the winning coalition, happy. As long as they feel they're getting the most attention and status by being in her clique, her reign as Queen Bee is untouchable. So, this brings us to the fundamental difference between a dictatorship and a democracy. How they distribute the treasure. A dictator's winning coalition is tiny, so he can reward them with private goods. What are private goods? They are things that only one or a few people can enjoy. For example, the exclusive rights to a diamond mine, a tax-free monopoly on the import business, a special pass that lets you ignore all laws, a Bugatti delivered directly to your garage. These rewards are potent, fast-acting, and perfect for buying the loyalty of a small team. But in a democracy, the leader's winning coalition is massive. You have to please tens of millions of voters. You can't give a Bugatti to everyone who votes for you. You'd go bankrupt. So, you have to provide public goods. What are public goods? They are things that, once provided, everyone can benefit from. For example, a highway without traffic jams, an efficient fire department, a strong military to protect the country, a clean water system you can trust. These are the only efficient ways to bribe a massive group of people. Now, we see the game board clearly. It's a cold machine, with no room for morality or ideals, only the raw calculation of interests and the exchange of power. But a machine needs an operator. The captain in his cabin, lying awake at night, calculating how to divvy up the gold and guard against mutiny. Regina George, on her throne, basking in the adoration of the school, but with a flicker of anxiety deep in her eyes. What is going on in their minds? What kind of psychological engine is driving this massive, cold machine? Is it infinite greed? Is it a pathological thrill from being in control? Or are they just born evil, enjoying the suffering of others? All of these guesses are close, but they don't hit the core. Today, I'm going to present you with a bold, perhaps shocking theory that might just upend your common sense. The fundamental, prime driver of every action a dictator takes is not greed, nor cruelty, but a cognitive bias hardwired into every single one of us. Yes, you and me. A demon in our minds that makes all of us make irrational decisions, and it's called loss aversion. This concept is the core of prospect theory, developed by two Israeli psychologists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. How big of a deal is this theory? It won Kahneman the Nobel Prize in Economics because it completely demolished the foundational assumption of traditional economics, that human beings are rational actors. The theory sounds academic, but I can explain its core idea in one sentence, and you'll get it instantly. The pain of losing $100 is far greater than the pleasure of gaining $100. Don't believe me? Think about it. If you found $100 on the street this morning, you might get a little jolt of happiness, maybe buy yourself a nicer lunch, and by the afternoon, you'd probably have forgotten about it. But if you left your house this morning and realized you'd lost $100 from your wallet, that hard-earned cash was just gone. That feeling of annoyance, regret, that pit in your stomach, I bet it would haunt you all day. You'd replay your every move in your head trying to figure out where you lost it. See? For the same $100, the negative emotional impact of losing is more than twice as strong as the positive impact of gaining. This psychological tick is everywhere in our lives. Take the stock market. Why do so many amateur investors cling to a losing stock, watching it go from a 30% loss to a 70% loss? Logically, they should just cut their losses. But they don't. Why? Because the moment they sell, the unrealized loss on their screen becomes a realized loss. The psychological pain of admitting you were wrong, of admitting you lost money, is so intense that they'd rather delude themselves and hold on, hoping it will one day bounce back. Or think about sports. If your team wins a huge championship game, you'll be ecstatic for a night, bragging to your friends the next day. But if your team gets defeated at the last second and loses the championship, that feeling of heartbreak and depression can stick with you for a whole week. The joy of victory is fleeting, but the pain of defeat is long and profound. That is loss aversion. It's a piece of code written into our basic operating system, a survival instinct that evolved to keep our ancestors alive in the wild, to be hyper-vigilant about what we might lose. Now, here comes the most crucial step. I want you to take this psychological model, multiply its intensity by 10,000, and then apply it to the dictator who is already sitting on the throne of power. For a dictator, the game is already over. He has already found the biggest prize in the world: absolute power, wealth, women, the power of life and death over others. He has it all. So, from the moment he takes that throne, his entire psychological state flips 180 degrees. His life is no longer about gaining more, because there's nothing left worth striving for. His life game has only one theme, one voice whispering in his ear 24/7, and it says, "Don't lose it. I cannot lose what I have." To him, power is no longer a comfortable throne. It's a tightrope, swaying precariously over a bottomless abyss. He is the man on the wire, and below him are countless vipers, all waiting to pull him down. Every step he takes, every decision he makes, has only one purpose: to maintain his balance and not to fall. So now, when you look at the 5 cold rules from the Dictator's Handbook, they take on a whole new meaning. They are not just a cold, political instruction manual. They are more like a paranoid's survival journal, born from the extreme psychological fear of loss. Now, let's put on our loss aversion X-ray glasses and perform a deep, unflinching psychological analysis of these 5 rules. You'll see clearly how these seemingly separate rules, like gears in a clock, are all driven by this one master engine, forming a precise and terrifying machine of power. Let's start with the first rule. Keep your winning coalition as small as possible. On the surface, as I said before, this is about making sure the loot is easy to divide. Fewer people means bigger shares, which means more loyalty. But that's looking at it from a gains perspective. If we look at it through the lens of loss aversion, you discover a deeper, darker motive. This isn't a financial issue at all. It's a risk management issue. Think about it. As a dictator who has everything, what do you fear most? Betrayal. A knife in the back from someone in your inner circle. Because they know exactly how you got to the top, and they know that if they get rid of you, they can enjoy the spoils as the new dictator. Every member of your coalition is, in essence, a potential risk factor, a bug that could cause you to lose everything. The more members you have, the more points of failure you need to monitor. Your power system's risk exposure is huge. For someone tormented by the fear of loss, this is the kind of nightmare that jolts them awake every night. So, what does a dictator driven by loss aversion do? He instinctively and pathologically seeks absolute, controllable security. How? He shrinks his coalition to the bare minimum. He's like an obsessive-compulsive programmer who writes his core code to be as short and self-contained as possible, because less code means fewer potential bugs. The master of this was Joseph Stalin in the Soviet Union. In the early days after the revolution, the Soviet Politburo was filled with brilliant minds, the old Bolsheviks who had fought alongside Lenin. All of them were respected, capable, and had their own ideas. But how did Stalin see them? He didn't see talent. He saw risk factors. People who could threaten him, who could cause him to lose his supreme power. And so, in the 1930 seconds, he unleashed the Great Purge. What was that like? It was a time of unimaginable terror in Moscow. A revolutionary hero one day could be confessing to being an imperialist spy in a secret court the next. In this way, Stalin eliminated almost all of his old comrades in arms, Bukharin, Zinoviev, Kamenev, and countless others. In the end, his winning coalition consisted only of tools like Molotov and Beria, men who were absolutely subservient and wouldn't dare to have a thought of their own. From the perspective of governing a country, Stalin destroyed a generation of the Soviet Union's most experienced elites, an incalculable loss. But from the perspective of a dictator driven by loss aversion, he made the best deal possible. He traded the country's loss for his own zero-risk power. He would rather let the state machine rust and crumble than allow a single part to spin out of his control. Okay, so you've stabilized your inner circle. But what if someone in that circle gets ambitious? This leads to the next, even cleverer rule. Rule number 2. Keep the pool of potential replacements for your coalition large. See how brilliant that is? It works in perfect tandem with the first rule. If the first rule is risk management, then this one is risk hedging. It introduces a constant external pressure on that supposedly stable inner circle. It's like a savvy investor who, despite being heavily invested in one stock, would never put all his money in it. He'll buy some hedge funds or other assets to protect himself in case that one stock crashes. For a dictator, every member of his winning coalition is a heavily invested stock. But that stock could go bust at any moment. So what does he do? He creates a huge bench of replacements waiting in the wings. This large pool of candidates has two effects. Internally, it keeps the current coalition members in a state of constant fear. Every single one of them knows, I am not irreplaceable. There are countless people out there who would kill for my job. This perpetual sense of crisis is the most effective form of discipline. The fear of losing everything they have is a more powerful leash than any reward. Externally, it gives the dictator incredible flexibility. If someone in his coalition becomes disobedient, or too powerful and popular for his own good, triggering the dictator's fear of losing power, he can replace him without a second thought, instantly promoting a newcomer from the bench. This ensures his power structure doesn't collapse because of the actions of one or two individuals. Adolf Hitler was a master of this risk-hedging game. He had a coterie of capable lieutenants, Göring of the Luftwaffe, Himmler of the SS, Goebbels of propaganda, and so on. Hitler never let any one of them become too powerful. Instead, he intentionally encouraged them to compete with each other, to build their own little fiefdoms, and to constantly vie for his favor. A classic example is the Knight of the Long Knives. Early in the Nazi regime, his paramilitary wing, the SA, and its leader Ernst Röhm, had become immensely powerful and were starting to act independently. Hitler sensed this potential risk of losing control. So, he unhesitatingly allied himself with the regular army and his own SS, and in one night, brutally purged the entire SA leadership. See what he did? He used a part of his replacement pool, the SS and the army, to eliminate a threatening current ally, the SA. It was a classic risk-hedging operation, with a single goal, to ensure that no force could ever make him lose his absolute control. All right, you've controlled the risks from your inner team, but what if someone on the outside gets their hands on resources and builds their own power base? This brings us to the third and perhaps most brutal rule. Rule number 3, control the revenue, keep the majority poor, and then use that revenue to enrich your chosen supporters. Friends, this move cuts off all risks at the source. It is loss prevention by pulling the rug out from under everyone. Why must you control the treasury? Because money, or resources, is the soil from which all opposition grows. If you can't control the nation's purse strings, then someone else, a provincial governor, a wealthy businessman, a foreign power, will use that money to build their own sphere of influence, their own winning coalition. And for you, that's a ticking time bomb that could cause you to lose everything. So, a dictator driven by loss aversion must, like a compulsive miser, hold all sources of national income in his own hands. Whether it's oil, minerals, taxes, or foreign aid, every single dollar must pass through him, must be signed off by him. Then, he executes a cruel two-track strategy. For the majority of the population, he keeps them struggling on the poverty line. Note, this isn't necessarily because he's sadistic. It's because from a risk control perspective, a poor population, exhausted from the daily struggle for survival, has the lowest capacity and will to organize and rebel against you. It's a proactive risk management strategy. On the other hand, with the immense wealth he controls, he bestows precise and jaw-droppingly generous rewards upon his chosen supporters. In an environment of widespread poverty, the psychological impact of this reward is nuclear. It's not just money. It's status, it's privilege, it's the feeling of being one of the chosen. This binds his fate to that of his supporters with chains of gold and power. The most extreme modern example is the Kim Dynasty in North Korea. How has this regime remained so stable? The key is that the state apparatus has a monopoly on nearly all economic activity and resources. The living standards for the general populace are extremely low. But at the same time, high-ranking military officials and core members of the Workers' Party enjoy a life of privilege unimaginable to ordinary citizens. And when someone within this system tried to challenge this rule, we saw the bloodiest outcome. Take Kim Jong-un's uncle, Jang Song-taek. At the time, Yang controlled key parts of North Korea's economy, including coal exports, and was building his own private slush fund. In Kim Jong-un's eyes, this was the ultimate threat, because it represented the formation of a potential power base that could cause him to lose his own. And so, we all know the result. Jang was mercilessly executed. This is the most extreme form of pulling the rug out, using physical annihilation to eliminate any possibility of losing control. Next, rule number 4. Pay your key supporters just enough to keep them loyal, but not a penny more. This rule is the pinnacle of loss aversion applied to financial management. It seeks a balance of risk under strict cost control. For a dictator dominated by loss aversion, every coin in his treasury is ammunition to defend his power. Therefore, he instinctively abhors any form of waste, and this waste can go in two directions. If you pay your supporters too little, what happens? They'll feel their loyalty isn't being fairly compensated. They'll grow resentful, and could be bought off by your rivals for a higher price. This would directly cause you to lose their support, a clear and present loss risk. But what if you pay them too much? Now that's a problem too. The extra money doesn't buy you any extra loyalty. Instead, that surplus cash is a loss in itself, a loss of resources that could have been spent on your security forces or on buying off more replacements. Even more dangerously, that money could make your supporters too rich, too independent. They might use it to build their own power base and become a threat to you in the future. This also increases your risk of losing power down the line. So, a shrewd dictator acts like a top-tier venture capitalist, precisely calculating the ROI on his loyalty investment. He pays his supporters a just right price, a price high enough to make the risk of betrayal seem too costly, but not high enough to give them the power to challenge him independently. Every single penny must be spent on the razor's edge of consolidating power and avoiding loss. You can see this logic in action with Vladimir Putin's Russia. When he first came to power, he quickly brought the oligarchs who had become fabulously wealthy after the Soviet collapse to heel. Those who were obedient, like Roman Abramovich, were allowed to keep their vast fortunes and live lives of luxury that was the just right payment. But those who tried to challenge his authority, like Mikhail Khodorkovsky, then Russia's richest man, were ruthlessly thrown in jail and had their assets seized. That was the price for crossing the red line. Through this carrot-and-stick approach, Putin precisely controls his winning coalition, ensuring no one poses a threat that could cause him to lose power. Finally, we come to the most critical rule, the one that most nakedly reveals the essence of loss aversion. Rule number 5. Never take money from your supporters' pockets to improve the lives of the people. This rule is the raw, unfiltered manifestation of loss aversion in decision-making. It reveals a brutal certainty principle. As a dictator, you face a choice every single day on your desk. Option A. Take $1 billion from the pockets of your generals and crony billionaires to build schools and hospitals for the masses. Option B. Do nothing. Let your allies continue their lavish lifestyles, and let the people continue to struggle on the poverty line. Which do you choose? In the framework of loss aversion, this choice doesn't even require a second of thought. Choosing option A, taking money from your supporters, represents a 100% certain loss. Your allies will feel the pain immediately. Their loyalty will plummet. They might even start plotting against you in a dark room that very night. This is an immediate, fatal, and absolutely certain risk of loss. And what do you get in return for trying to please the people? Maybe a better reputation? Maybe society becomes a little more stable? These potential gains are completely uncertain, long-term, and vague. The love of the people is like a cloud in the sky. Who knows when it will rain and when it will just drift away? A brain governed by loss aversion, when faced with a certain loss versus an uncertain gain, will always, almost instinctively, choose to avoid the certain loss at all costs. This is why we see so many resource-rich countries fall into the resource curse. Take Equatorial Guinea in Africa. The country has immense oil reserves, and its GDP per capita has at times surpassed that of many European nations. But where did that money go? The president, Teodoro Obiang, who has ruled for decades, and his family live like gods. His son, also the vice president, owns $100 million mansions in Paris and Malibu, with a garage full of Bugattis and Lamborghinis. Meanwhile, the majority of the country's population doesn't even have access to clean drinking water, and their average life expectancy is among the lowest in the world. This is the reality of that choice. For Obiang, using oil dollars to bribe and reward his winning coalition of family members and military leaders is a certain investment in keeping his power. Spending that money on the public is a certain loss that he desperately avoids, as it could trigger a backlash from his inner circle. So you see, these 5 rules, from managing your core team, to hedging external risks, to controlling the treasury, and finally, to the precise distribution of benefits, they all combine to form a seamless defense system with a single objective: to avoid loss. It is an efficient and cold-hearted machine, driven by the most primitive fear in human nature. So, friends, when we've read the Dictator's Handbook from cover to cover and decoded the psychological password behind these 5 rules, you might come to a rather terrifying conclusion. And it is this: becoming a successful dictator, well, it doesn't seem all that hard, does it? You could be a school kid who knows nothing. You don't need to know what a national leader is supposed to do, and you certainly don't need to learn how to govern a country well or ensure the people live happy lives. All that complicated stuff is totally irrelevant. You just need to follow a few simple instructions, like you're playing a video game. Step 1. Get rid of the previous ruler. Step 2. Find the money, whether it's oil or taxes. Step 3. Use that money to build a small, absolutely loyal, winning coalition. Step 4. Pay them, and pay them just enough to keep them loyal. Boom! Game over. You can now rule over everyone, enjoying the thrill of being the one and only. Sounds like a crude beginner's tutorial, doesn't it? But I want you to flip that thought on its head. If this logic of power is a game guide that's open for anyone to read, that means that since you know how to play the game, you also inherently know where the glitches are. You know where the final boss's weak spot is. Just as the book says, the dictator's seemingly indestructible fortress is actually on the verge of collapse at all times. A major natural disaster, a defeat in war, an unexpected succession crisis, or even a global economic storm could empty his treasury overnight. And when that happens, the call to battle might just be sounded. Okay, you might say, that makes sense in theory, but the dictator has guns. He's very good at terrifying us, at making us feel that if we step 1 inch out of line, the consequences will be severe. You're right. Fear is indeed his most powerful weapon. Under the threat of that gun, under the terror of one person resists, the whole family suffers. It is indeed incredibly difficult for the people to rise up. But friends, I'm going to ask you to flip this logic one more time with me. The very fact that a person needs to use fear as the core tool of his rule, proves one thing. He is the most terrified, most insecure person in the entire country. He is, in fact, more afraid than you, me, or any other ordinary person. The gun he uses to scare you is the very thing that exposes the even bigger, all-consuming black hole of fear in his own heart. That demon we talked about, loss aversion, has metastasized in him into a 24/7 paranoid personality disorder. He's terrified of the shifting international landscape, terrified that sanctions from a major power will cause him to lose his vital external income. He's terrified of the workforce just checking out, of people becoming totally passive, not consuming, not having kids, not striving, causing the economy to collapse, and making him lose the very foundation of his wealth. He's terrified that he won't be able to extract enough wealth, causing him to lose his ability to feed his forever hungry inner circle. He's terrified that the people will no longer be bound by fear, that they'll organize and take to the streets, causing him to lose control of society. And he is perhaps most terrified that, when the people finally do take to the streets, his loyal supporters, the ones holding all his money, will lack loyalty, that they'll raise their guns an inch higher, causing him to lose his final guarantee of force. You see, he's like a prisoner sitting on top of a volcano, desperately trying to plug every crack that might erupt. His strength is built on an extremely fragile balance. His ferocity is born from his own deep-seated weakness. So friends, once you understand this logic of dictatorship, once you see through to the immense fear of losing that resides in his heart, you'll discover that there is, in fact, so much that you can do. Every ordinary person living under this power machine actually has the ability to make the man on the throne a little more miserable, a little more terrified, every single day. You don't need to be a frontline hero. You don't need to do something earth-shattering. When you choose not to believe his lies, when you choose to share true information, when you insist on speaking the truth and doing honest work in your own profession, instead of sucking up, when you choose not to cooperate, refusing to participate in the workings of that oppressive machine, even when you choose to lie flat, no longer contributing your surplus value to this system. Every tiny thing you do increases the friction cost of this machine. It intensifies the dictator's insecurity and his fear of losing control. And when enough people are doing it, the cost of maintaining his rule gets higher and higher, until one day it becomes a price he can no longer afford to pay. Everything we've talked about today is not meant to make you cynical, and it's certainly not meant to make you despair. It's the exact opposite. It's meant to empower you with the most potent force of all, the power of clarity. When you see the blueprint of the power machine, when you see the demon that operates it, you will realize that the seemingly omnipotent ruler, his joys, his rages, his fears is actually tightly bound by this transparent logic. And his greatest fear is you, a clear-eyed you, a you who is no longer afraid, a you who knows the rules of the game. Remember, the strongest prison is never the one made of high walls and barbed wire. It's the one made of our own fear. And the only key to unlocking it is to realize that the warden is more afraid of the dawn than any of the inmates. All right, friends, that's our story for today. I hope this journey into the dark side of human nature has given you some new and powerful insights. If you enjoy this kind of deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments, or let me know what other interesting topics you'd like me to talk about. I'm your friend and a teller of tales. See you next time.